Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Educ Show. I am your host, Educ Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You'll get notified when I post content each and every week. My guest is Carl Unegbu, author of Comedy Goes to Court: When People Stop Laughing and Start Fighting. Carl is a renowned expert in the world of comedy and legal matters. His comprehensive book, which utilizes comedy icons and other figures, is a guide to help comedians become aware of ways to avert lawsuits and legal entanglements. And as I mentioned to him before we came on, it is quite timely. Your books are, you couldn't have timed this better, sir. I mean, wow, what a time to write a book about comedy and legal issues. Carl is based in New York and previously served as the editor of Comedy Beat website. He's also the writer of the O. Carl's Law blog site, which delves into the correlations between comedy and the law. Carl, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Let's get right into it. And I mean, I'm saying this over and over, but it's so true. Your book is so timely, given all the recent disagreements, we'll say, in the world of comedy between comedians, stand-up comics, and others. But you've been writing about comedy for a long time. What motivated you to write this book in particular? And where did your love for comedy come from?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. With respect to how I got into comedy, I did that. First of all, I studied journalism at Columbia after practicing law in Miami, where I went to law school. So I got into comedy more like as an act of journalism. You know, me and some friends of mine, some former colleagues, we began this website to cover comedy. It's a news site. We call it Comedy Beat. So I was one of the editors and reporters. Um, so so we did that. But before then, when I was going to school at Columbia, when I was just a student, I had covered comedy too. You know, more like for class work. You know, submission for class assignments and things. But it wasn't anything um, resembling doing it for the media. You know, as some kind of media thing. So, but so I did that, and then I left it behind when I graduated. So years down the road, um, friends of mine, colleagues approached me to let's like start this website that covers comedy. So yeah, that's how we got into comedy, and it was New York City, lots of clubs, lots of people, lots of locales, lots of institutions. So yeah, it was like a real, more like the place to be when he wanted to like cover comedy. So I mean, so much was going through the city, people coming and out. And so it was like a big moment. This was like, I'd say 2009 when we started this, or 2010, something like that. So I did that for a while. And then I started to notice something that these comedians we are covering, we are actually coming in with legal issues around, their work. So that kind of like renewed, kind of kindled the lawyer in me when I looked at comedy. It kind of made me begin to look at comedy in a different way than just somebody covering fun and games. Like comedy was just all fun and making people laugh, and which is good, which is like the core of comedy. But then there was also this aspect that was emerging, becoming more prominent, something like a phenomenon in comedy where lawsuits were becoming, part of the picture. So it kind of like made me start to look at it in a different way. So I started to blog about this, comedians and the lawsuits around their work and their lives and things. And then, there were lots of comments back and forth from readers, fans and readers who liked what I was doing, and they critiqued, they applauded, they admired. So I did that for a whole like couple of years. So I amassed a whole bunch of stuff, material on that kind of coverage. And it was during one of the events that we had covering comedy that, some friends, fans, readers suggested to me, hey, why don't you maybe like put this into a book? I mean, that's the best way to believe, really. useful to the industry, like put this thing together in a book, the various aspects that you've been covering. Yeah, people would appreciate that kind of thing. So they can like have a source where they can like uh, access this kind of conversation. So I started to think about it, and it kind of made sense after a while. So that's how I kind of got into the idea of writing this kind of book.
Hmm. One of the overriding themes in your book revolves around the critical nature of contractual language, especially at the beginning of a partnership or deal. Can you speak to why this is so important and why paying attention to the details of an agreement is so fundamental to comedians? Because if you look around, just about everything happens because of either a contract situation. Even now, if you look at what's going on with Monique and Paramount, it's always about the contract. So talk to me about contractual language and why that's so important.
Very, very. I'm glad you should bring this up because um, that's the starting point, really, with these things. I mean, if you want to look, you could go to Times Square or some public place and make people laugh and goof around, and if that's all you want to do, that's cool. But if you want to like get paid for your work, do this thing on a serious, basis, perform at clubs, perform for stations, perform uh, at shows, places where people like really make a comedy career happen. A lot of times you need to begin that by getting a proper agreement to govern, the thing you're about to do. And my friend, this is where so much stuff breaks down because, just because you do the show, well, if you're not careful, you may not get paid. And there is no shortage of people who are willing to not pay you. So that's like the starting point. And in the book, I discuss so many famous comedians who've had these issues, like Kerry Shandling, even Dave Chappelle, you know, um, you just name it, John Lovis, Howard Stern. Yeah, these guys are all, Conan O'Brien. These guys are all discussed in that chapter where I talk about like making the contract. And the one thing that really ought to um, be considered important to comedians is to get to write the thing as clearly as you can, so that people you have as much clarity and as little conflict as you can, because little conflicts, little disagreements in the way you've written the thing, it could cost you a lot of money down the road. So to avoid lawsuits, the best way to really avoid lawsuits is one small rule of thumb is this. If you're making that deal and somebody says, how about this? Let's say you want to go from point A to point B, maybe from Times Square to maybe Grand Central. And then somebody says, well, okay, so you go from Times Square to Grand Central, you get $50. How about something happens that you don't get to Grand Central today? Maybe you get there tomorrow. What would happen? Would you still get the same money? If you guys, both of you don't answer yes to that question, then you have a problem. That's like a rule of thumb to like get the deal properly arranged so you kind of have the same understanding of the contract itself. Because if you have different understandings of what the contract says, what any term of the contract says, then at that point, you better believe that you have a lawsuit in your future
Hmm.
when things, arise down the road. So yeah, so that's like it's a very important chapter and it's a very important thing to consider. Frankly, it's the starting point before you even like get into what you can say, what you cannot say, joke stealing, and all those other heavy things. Before you even get to like let's say the show ends. How about syndication money? How about merchandising? These are all things that arise, especially if you're doing like a sitcom, home improvement, family, happy days, or even the situation with the comedy store in Los Angeles. So these are all things. I mean, money, money is a big source of conflict because, first of all, we are talking about money here. That's why these conflicts arise. I mean, they don't just arise, out of nowhere. Usually it's about money.
Big money.
Yeah, especially big money these days
Mm-hmm.
because comedy has become a big business, huge. And in the book I discussed that comedy is in a golden age. So the money is big. because of the big money, there's a lot of attraction to lawsuits and things like so. Yeah, so if you live in America, America is addicted to lawsuits. I mean, it's a very litigious society. So I mean, if you're gonna live here, it's something you have to be, I guess, watching out for, especially if you're beginning to succeed, make a lot of money, come into the public square like comedy. And if the money and the celebrity are flowing, then you tend to come into the crosshairs in a place like America with respect to lawsuits. So yeah, and the best thing you can do for yourself is to get yourself a good agreement, perhaps starting with a good lawyer, and then you go from there.
Public access to court documents, to me, is a widely overlooked source of information and at times entertainment. Some of the information in these court documents are highly entertaining. Um, you actually use court documents in your research. So tell me about how you go about, looking and reading and evaluating court documents, and what makes them so interesting to you.
Well, court documents, first of all, for the most part, they are public documents. Any citizen can, go and, yeah, sit in a courtroom, sit in a courtroom, listen to proceedings, and then documents, yeah, you can access court documents if you make the proper request. I mean, sometimes you may have to pay some money for the copying, but, it's a public document. And, yeah, so this, I mean, first of all, I started to deal with court documents as a journalist. You cover things, and especially maybe some criminal proceeding or some attack, or, something like that. So that was my first, um, attempt, my first activities in trying to like access court document. I mean, apart from my days as a lawyer, which is different. If you're a lawyer, that's a whole other thing. But if you're like a journalist and a reporter and you're trying to cover this, it's a whole different angle to things. So yeah, so I did that from a journalistic point of view. Then when I started to kind of change the angle a bit to how the law affects comedians, then yeah, I also like began to pour over the court papers and things to like learn more about some of these issues. But to analyze the issues and like make a proper prediction about where things were gonna go. Well, no court document can tell you that. You have to like, if you know the law, then you can like know how to steer that. So, but the book is in the way I wrote the book is like something at the intersection of law and comedy. By the way, this is what the book looks like. Comedy goes to court when people stop fighting, stop laughing and start fighting. So the book is like at the intersection of comedy and the law. And if you were just a journalist, you couldn't exactly write this book, a typical journalist, because you'd have to actually go to a lawyer to explain the law to you. How the law affects what comedians are doing. And then if you were just a lawyer, you probably wouldn't be able to write the book either because you'll be writing like a lawyer. And lawyers write in a way almost like for lawyers alone. It's tough language. It's like deliberately obscure. Some people call it mumbo jumbo. So lawyer language, lawyer speak. So it kind of takes somebody who understands the world of comedy, loves it, and then who also understands law and would know how to like break it down for comedians to understand in the language that they follow. Kind of, think of the kind of language you would see on maybe when you read People's Magazine. It's different from the kind of language you would see in a law book, for instance. Very different kind of language. So for you to like explain to people, comedians and everyday people, what the law says or does about what they do for a living, you have to be able to like break it down, which means you have to know the law closely and then know how to write the thing for comedians to get. And if you're a journalist, your life is a life of storytelling. You are able to write for the masses, general audiences, New York Times, Los Angeles, whatever they are for the masses. A law review book is not for the masses, it's for lawyers. So the language is different. So to be able to break it down and bring it over to this world of comedians and everyday people, yeah, you do have to really know what you're doing. So that's where the experience kind of comes in. And I was able to do the book because my life experience straddles the world of comedy and law. So I was able to like bring it together in that way. But it's not. Some people have asked me, well, why isn't there a book like this? Why has it never been written before? Well, that's part of the explanation. You have to like stand in a unique position to be able to write a book like that. You have to like know both worlds, how they intersect before you could like carry off this kind of project. And frankly, until I did it, I didn't even think it could be done. I wasn't even thinking to do that. People kept prodding me to do it. And I was afraid maybe it couldn't be done. It hadn't been done before. But as I started to really think about it, you know, I took it as some kind of mission to do this, more like as a service to the industry. I figured, well, if I was covering comedy all along, it's fun and games, and then there's this other thing that is happening to comedy. Well, I'm actually a lawyer. I don't need someone to tell me, you know, what these things are. I don't need someone to explain the law to me. So I can explain it to this industry that I love writing about. I know the way they behave, the way they think, and what kind of language, would make sense to them. So that was why I deliberately wrote the book. The language is kind of conversational in tone. The sort of language you'd read, let's say from People magazine or on the world famous page 6 of the New York Post. That kind of language. That's the level of simplicity of this writing here, even though it's talking about the law, but it was the law broken down in a very simple manner that if you were riding the New York City subway, you could easily follow that kind of language. So,
You also write a lot about free speech, which is a bedrock topic in your book. And you explore in details as it relates to comedy. What's your view of the current battle that comedians are facing now with free speech, especially in the era of cancel culture and an era of what I call political action through comment sections? Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's an interesting way of looking at it. But yeah, but free speech, yeah. Um, Actually, that's the biggest chapter in the book, and it covers the entire gamut from like um, literally every kind of comedian. I mean, I had guys there like Jerry Seinfeld, Jimmy Kimmel, Jay Leno, Chappelle, John Oliver, Bill Maher. So yeah, I mean, it covers a whole bunch of stuff because comedians talk for a living. If you talk for a living, you're liable to offend people, especially if you make jokes at the expense of people, when either you're talking about things or you're talking about people. And if you live in a place like America, which is addicted to lawsuits, yeah, so you can see the connection there between people talking, sometimes offending others, and then being sued. Now, you get sued. You get sued not only by people who are looking for money as such, even though some may be looking for money because, comedy now is big money. So yeah,
Right.
there'll be those wanting to there'll be those wanting to cash in, ride your coattails to fame and fortune by suing you. But that's one part of it. Now there's another part. People who are simply offended because we live in a time of it's a very sensitive time with woke ideology, woke intimidation, cancel culture. So yeah, so there are those sensitivities as well. And then there are people who would actually sue you, not even because they are looking for money or because they don't want you to say some things out in public, like the cancel culture people, they don't want you to talk in certain ways that they feel maybe you're attacking the vulnerable, punching down. They don't want you to do that. So they can sue you for that reason. But this other category I am talking about, they are not suing you for that reason, nor are they suing you to make money. They are suing you for strategic reasons, what I can call a strategic lawsuit. What we have seen happen sometimes. Like in the book, I discuss the lawsuit filed by Donald Trump against Bill Maher. This was this was back in 2013. Over like the Barack Obama's birth certificate and things. So Maher kind of like turned it against Donald Trump in a different way. Tell him, look, if you can produce your birth certificate to show that you're not the son of an orange orangutan and a human woman, I'll give you $5 million. The same money Trump promised to give Obama if Obama would produce his birth certificate. So I mean, yeah, Ma said that the color of Trump's hair and the color of an orange orangutan, you know, were the only two things in nature of the same color. So he made it as a joke on Jay Leno's show. And then, unexpected, well, very surprisingly, Trump the next day or so came up with his birth certificate. So well, here's my birth certificate. I am not the son of an orange orangutan. I'm a human being. I was born in Queens, all that jazz. Well, now so pay me $5 million. Well, when Ma didn't pay, he sued him. He sued him. I mean, this was so surprising to people that he would actually go forward, go through with that threat. So he sued him. And of course, the lawsuit was settled, like months down the road on April Fool's Day of all days in 2013. But the point of the suit wasn't so much to get the money, but to harass a comedian, shut him up, some kind of censorship and that kind of thing. But the one that was actually more egregious is the one against John Oliver, the coal industry billionaire, Robert Murray, a good friend of Donald Trump, sued Oliver for commentary Oliver made about Oliver was trying to ridicule the Trump administration for trying to renew and revive the coal industry. And then Oliver was saying that that was a terrible thing, that this other billionaire who was like one of the advocates of those kinds of programs, that he was actually an obstacle to mine safety regulations. He talked about some explosion at a mine in Utah that killed 9 people and all the disputes about the actual cause of that explosion. So Oliver said it was the fault of the billionaire and his company for not providing enough, safety precautions and stuff. But the billionaire was claiming that it was an earthquake that caused that. So there was that dispute. And then he said, well, then Oliver called him a geriatric doctor evil and everything. So before the episode ran, so they called Oliver, said, well, look, we believe this is defamatory. You cannot run this. It's false. It's very defamatory. You can run. If you run it, we are gonna sue you. Oliver said, fine, I'm gonna run this. Sue me. So he presented the episode, and well, this is a billionaire. He has money to make good on his threat. So he sued. But the suit ended early. But the lesson of the story is, I mean, he lost because look, he was gonna lose anyway, and he wasn't suing because he thought he would win. Again, it was a strategic lawsuit. By the time the suit ended, and the suit ended early, after very few short months, Oliver had spent over $200,000 on lawyers. He had also his liable insurance went up like more than 300%. So I mean, even though he won the lawsuit, which he was going to win anyway, he wasn't exactly smiling because this guy had tried to teach him a lesson, and that was the whole point of the thing. So I guess these are the issues around free speech for comedians. When you speak freely, a lot of times you're gonna win, but at what cost? And those are the considerations today that are bubbling up. These are things that are making lawsuits. Apart from there are issues of contract and joke stealing and other things, but this thing about free speech, yeah, is beginning to kind of make comedy morph into a thing that attracts lawsuits where, for instance, the cost of defending lawsuits now has become almost the cost of doing business, something that affects the bottom line in comedy as a career thing. So, and the suits, they come, sometimes the government sues comedians, sometimes fans sue them, sometimes comedy clubs sue them, other times even family members, even former lovers in romantic relationships with them. So, it's a crazy thing. And like I said earlier, the motivations differ from one person to the other. But the common denominator is these lawsuits that are being filed that have become like a cost of doing business in comedy. And if you want to trace when it began, it's a new phenomenon, like something that is happening in contemporary comedy. It wasn't there like a generation ago, you know. It wasn't there a generation ago, but it's here now because, like I said, it's because comedy has become more important in the cultural conversation, in the pop culture. The profile has risen very much. Um, I mean, like if you saw Jon Stewart returned the other day to the Daily Show two Mondays ago, and then he knocked Biden, he knocked Trump, and you saw the buzz he generated.
It was hilarious too.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's the kind of thing comedy has become. The profile has risen, the money has increased, and yeah, and then it matters that we live in America, a place addicted to lawsuits. So what that means is this: comedy has come into the crosshairs of people filing lawsuits. It has become the shiny new thing, in the on the landscape. So it's predictable how the lawsuit situation uh, would arise from that kind of circumstance.
um, something else you touch on one of the lawsuits revolves around new platforms for comedy. I mean, in the old days, you had comedy clubs, or you had movies, or you had a sitcom, and people would watch it and so forth and so on. But now, with the rise of YouTube and TikTok and places like that, you write about an example of where someone saw something on YouTube and may or may not have used it in a comedy routine. So, talk to me about the new platforms, especially with this, with more access now, and how that can be a good thing, but also, people can literally take ideas of something they see on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things that happen where, people are talking about like copyright infringement. Let's say, I am saying the same thing as you are saying, but you are the man with the bigger microphone. You're a national figure. I make one joke and you take my joke and you run it on your big platform. And the entire world, they give you credit for that joke, not knowing that, you got the joke from me, the guy with the lesser profile. In other words, so what can I do to protect myself, me, the little guy? It's some of the issues that I discuss in the book, like the lawsuit again. When somebody sued Conan O'Brien, you know, he said Conan stole his joke about the Washington Monument. And then this guy said he rendered his joke on Twitter. His joke was on Twitter. Said he posted the joke on Twitter one morning, and then that same evening that Conan, ran the same joke on his show. That while people gave Conan credit for that joke, they didn't realize that the joke came from him. So he turns around and he sues Conan for damages, to like pay him, money for stealing his show, copyright infringement lawsuit. So one of the big issues is, well, did he really copy the joke from him? If so, I mean, first of all, if you're talking about copyright infringement, joke stealing, you have to show that the other person had access to the platform where your joke or whatever the material is that was allegedly stolen, where the material existed. In this case, it's a joke. So where did the joke exist? Well, he said the joke existed on Twitter. He posted it on Twitter. So that's where he said that, well, this guy had access to it. Okay, if he had access to it, did he in fact steal the thing? Well, those are some of the big issues. And, in comedy, is the copyright protection is kind of smaller than what you would have with movies and things, because in comedy, things like the setup, because setup in a comedy setup for a joke is sort of like the plot in a movie. So you go from the plot to the conclusion and things. In comedy, the analogy, what looks like the same thing is like the the setup. You have the setup and then you have the punchline. So if you can, like, in comedy, the setup is not protected at all. which is unfortunate, but that's the reality. Unlike the movies, in the movies, the plot line and everything is protected all the way till like the conclusion of the thing. In comedy, the setup is not protected. Now the punchline is not protected if you can like simply vary the thing just a bit. If the punchline was like ABC, you can say, DEZ. That so that kind of thing. It's easy to steal a joke in comedy because of the small copyright protection that exists for comedy material. So that's like a struggle, like a continuing struggle in the industry to see how greater protection can be afforded to comedy. But it's tough. I mean, it's been an old conversation that is not really getting any better. And with more forums where comedy can be presented, TV, the internet, Twitter, social media, all these new forums, it has become more difficult to like control copyright infringement when it comes to jokes. So I mean, one person said one time, David Brenner, the comedy legend, Brenner said it's easier to stop a serial killer than a serial thief in comedy. you know, and if we can protect our jokes, then he'd be a billionaire somewhere in Europe today. So yeah, so that's like an old industry problem. It's been there a long time, and it's getting worse now. Except that because of the new situation we face with lawsuits and things, so there are more lawsuits that are filed now over that kind of problem. Previously, all people did was okay. If somebody is a joke thief, steals jokes all the time, then the producers who produce shows or comedy clubs, they don't book the person. So you're a joke thief. So they kind of blackball the person from the industry. That was the job of the gatekeepers. Today, well, the problem is still there, but the work that gatekeepers are doing, it has become less and less effective because, like I said, there are more and more platforms where comedy is rendered and where jokes can be stolen. Jokes on TV, things on specials on HBO, things on Twitter, social media. So there are lots of new places now, other than just nightclubs. Sorry, comedy clubs. I mean, traditionally, you wanted to see a comedy show, you went to a comedy club. It's not that way anymore. You don't have to go to a comedy club today to see a show. You can sit in your living room and you're watching a comedy show. You can go on Twitter. You can, so many other places. There are lots of specials out there. So, it's a whole new environment. And there are so many more lawsuits now in this new environment in that way. So yeah, it's a particular problem. But for YouTube, I remember you said YouTube.
Yes.
Again, YouTube is another forum where jokes, are rendered, where these things exist. Now, if you take a joke from YouTube, somebody else's joke, now can they sue the YouTube proprietor for letting you steal the joke? No, the answer is no. And we've had that problem. That it came up. I mean, I covered the problem in this book where I talked about the lawsuit between South Park,
right,
and Brown Mark.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually the court said, well, look, you got it from YouTube, but it doesn't mean that YouTube has any liability for you stealing the joke. So they analyzed the case by saying, well, how much copying did he do? If he copied just a little, then that comes under what they call fair use. Because under the fair use doctrine, you're allowed to copy something as long as you copy just enough for your purpose. If your purpose is commentary, for instance, you want to comment on a book, well, you have to kind of tell people what you're commenting on. So inevitably, you're going to have to take some of the text in the book to present it and then critique the book if you're doing commentary. Or if you're trying to parody a show, you want to do a parody of a show, well, you can't just do parody in the air. You have to show people what you're parodying. So these situations all involve taking the copyrighted work, just a little of it, for your purpose. If your purpose is commentary or parody, yeah, so that's how that case happened. The court said, well, that, South Park just took just 1.5 minutes of a 25-minute show that, it was just using it for parody. And so it wasn't copyright infringement, that kind of thing. So YouTube is is a there's a problem there, but unfortunately you can't exactly sue YouTube today, because it's just a proprietor. It doesn't, you know, uh, control the content unless,
Exactly.
for instance, you actually tell them that, look, this content, it violates my copyright. I need you to remove it. So if you tell them that, then they have to investigate to see if the material offends your copyright. If it does, then they can take it down. But if you didn't do that, if you just came to sue them because you saw your material being violated on their site, then it's not enough. You have to show that they have some fault. Usually the fault is that you told them to take it down and they didn't investigate. They allowed the thing to stay there anyway. I don't know if I'm making sense with that.
No, 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 it is because it's such a. I think you also wrote about a situation with Michael Che, a situation where there was a TikToker, I believe, or
Right.
who had put a joke out there and was saying that Michael Che took it and used
Exactly.
it in his comedy show. But ultimately, I don't think it went anywhere. But that whole concept of fair use, and with so much content on YouTube, it's almost impossible unless you don't watch YouTube to not be influenced by it. So I would think for comedians especially, it's a very dangerous situation because you're right. The larger players, the larger comedians can literally embellish it a little bit and borrow it and make it their own, and then your content is obsolete.
Right, right. And there's another reason why, there's a further reason why stealing jokes today is a particular problem because comedy has become big today, big business. A lot of money is paid today for comedy products. So your joke is like your money in the bank. If somebody is stealing your joke, they are literally stealing money from your pocket. So, the thing, it rises to a level today that wasn't there before when comedy wasn't a biggie. I mean, look, just one generation ago, if you said you wanted to grow up to be a comedian, your parents didn't exactly feel thrilled about your career plans. You probably will be told to maybe become a lawyer, become a doctor, a teacher, some career where you actually get paid and look forward to, retirement or whatever, not comedy. But we've come a long way from there to now, where comedy is like a thing in itself, a whole career path that could lead you to fame and fortune and whatever. So, um, what that also means is, so what is this thing you have? What is this product you are selling? That product you are selling is your joke. So if somebody steals a joke today, as opposed to one generation ago, they are stealing something of real, tangible value to you. So joke stealing today has become, a more significant problem than it was back in the day.
In the last couple of minutes we have left, I want to ask you now about the phenomena of comedians going at each other and arguing and calling each other out. I mean, we had obviously the Cat Williams nuclear interview that he did on Club Shay Shay. You have Monique, and just over the weekend, you had a situation where Donnell Rawlings, comedian who's associated with Dave Chappelle, openly confronted Corey Holcomb during his show about some of the things that Corey Holcomb was saying. And so you're seeing this anger and confrontational aspect of comedy that I've never seen before, and it tends to happen among comedians of color. I mean, that's another wrinkle to all of this. So, studying comedy as long as you have, and writing about it, and knowing it like you do, what's your perspective on this new thing of comedians going at each other like this?
Yeah, I think that is a natural product of the new situation we have today, where comedy has become so significant. It has become, it has taken on a much higher profile. Like, I mean, I just gave you an example of, Jon Stewart and his appearance. So this is what comedy is today. It's almost like the new religion. It provokes a lot of, reactions in people, and you know, a lot of people watch comedians. Comedians are like, some people have described them as the new rock stars of today. They set the tone in the cultural conversation by, in a way that they didn't before. I mean, it used to be that they were just people making a joke. Now, there is this new phenomenon, for instance, political comedy, where comedians actually take a position, stake out a position, they advocate for their point of view, the people on their side of the political divide. And, it's part of the whole polarization of society today, on the right and on the left. So comedy is no longer something where people just make jokes, not both sides. No, people now like pick sides and they come to a show knowing the politics of the comedian. So if you try to like vary from what they thought you were going to present, they did not applaud. So, it's a whole different thing altogether. So you have that, the polarization of the political space, and then political comedy comes into it. So people now use jokes to hurt and to wound and to promote a political perspective. And then there's also this thing about woke ideology and cancel culture and things. So these things have made comedy this new big thing. And the environment itself is so sensitive to what people say and things like cancel culture and stuff. It's a very sensitive environment where you're not expected to say certain things, you know, by the woke intimidators who think, well, you shouldn't be punching down. You're like oppressing people who were previously oppressed. So yeah, so there's all of that. I guess my point is there's a new environment where comedy has become a very serious thing for all sorts of reasons, whether it is political comedy, where you are taking a side in the political debate. Let's say, I mean, if you see a guy like Jimmy Kimmel, that comedian, or Bill Maher, their politics is different from the politics of, say, Greg Gutfeld. So there's left and there's right, and that's just the way it's going. So comedy has become this thing that's active in politics and in people's lives and in the daily conversation about culture. So, and then of course, there's also money and celebrity in it. So these things are, it places comedy in a place where it never was, even just one generation ago. So if you're talking about these new emotions that it evokes in people and things, I mean, one time Will Smith went, it was 2 years ago, he went to the Oscars and slapped, Chris Rock. So I mean, this is what comedy has become. It's no longer just mere fun and games. It has become a way to like push a perspective, political perspective, or like try to knock somebody on a social plane, that kind of thing. So, and then of course, there's also money in it. So, yeah, it's part of the whole new world, a brave new world that we live in today. That is why it's provoking all those kinds of, emotions and things. I mean,
Well,
that's
well, Carl, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. As I mentioned multiple times, your book is very timely. I encourage folks; it's a great read, and you forget about a lot of the legal battles that had happened before. You wrote some things about Cat Williams that I totally forgot about. We look at Cat now, but you were writing about things that happened 10, 12 years ago, and
right.
others who are now still in the news. And so your book, as I said, it really gives a very unique perspective on the times today. And you were right there back then. You kind of called all this. You saw it coming,
Yeah,
and that's reflective in your book. So I applaud you on your foresight because this comedy thing is it's massive right now.
it is totally massive. And here's the thing about this, and what I have to say. This book has two aspects to it. I mean, if you're in it for the jokes, there are lots of wonderful jokes, fascinating read, lots of things comedians did. I mean, it could give you the sense that reading the book could give you the sense that maybe you're sitting in a comedy club, taking in a show, or you're watching a comedy special on HBO or something. So that's one aspect of the book, the stories that happen even before the law intervenes to say one thing or the other, just the things the comedians were doing before they got in trouble with the law or with each other or with the fans. So that in and of itself is very interesting. If you want to read the book for that reason, for the jokes in it, yeah, great. But if you also want to read the thing for the more serious aspect, where we are now talking about, how comedians can stay safe, protect their material, not get in trouble, how they can fight back against people trying to control their free speech, all that stuff. Then that's the other aspect of the book. And as you can guess, that's where the title of the book comes from. Comedy goes to court when people stop laughing and start fighting. This other aspect of it, where the law now intervenes. The first aspect is just the stories. It's just with the stories. Then the other aspect deals with what the law does in comedy, how it intervenes, breach of contract, free speech, copyright infringement, all that stuff. So whatever reason you choose to read the book for, it's a fascinating read, and the language is simple and accessible. If you like the sort of simple, easy language you find in People Magazine or the New York Post, yeah, this is the book you want to read. This is a continuation of that kind of language. So yeah, it's a good read, and it's called Comedy Goes to Court when people stop laughing and start fighting. Wadi.
All right. And if people want a copy of the book or more information about you, where can they go?
Yeah, they can. First of all, a copy of the book is available on Amazon and at bookstores. You ask for the book and they can get it to you if it's not on the shelf. And then to follow my blog and other commentaries over the years, it's called Okal's Law. Okal's Law, that's where my blog is. It's Okal's at http okalslaw.com. And it has lots of readings about this. And then it goes beyond just the law. It also has commentaries on the contemporary issues in society, like, the one I just put out there, this story about moonlighting in comedy. There was this guy, a journalist from NPR, who was fired from his job for moonlighting as a comedian. So, I kind of talk about that issue. And yeah, the whole thing about cancellation, political correctness, these ones have nothing to do with the law. They are just social commentary. So the blog has both commentary on social issues and, the sort of stuff that's in the book. So that's where they can go for more reading on these issues. But yeah, it's there. Okal's Law is a blog.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, my guest has been Carl Unegbu. He is author of Comedy Goes to Court, When People Stop Laughing and Start Fighting. This is a guide about what's going on today. So as you see all the headlines around comedians and lawsuits and things happening in the world of comedy, Carl's book will give you some excellent context to put it in and help it all make sense. So Carl, congratulations on the book. And I want to thank you for coming on the Edric Show.
Thank you so much, Edric. I'm very honored to have been here. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that.
You're very welcome. This has been another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified when I post content each and every week. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next episode.